liftoff. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the hearing this morning. Before we get started, I would ask that everyone pause for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. To ensure that we have all of our commissioners with us, whether they're present here in the hearing room, present here at our office, or joining us virtually, I will take a brief roll call. District 1.
Commissioner Howard here virtually.
District 2.
This is Commissioner Belser. I'm present in the hearing room.
District 3.
Commissioner Randall in the hearing office, unmuted and ready.
District 4.
Commissioner Irvin, virtually due to COVID.
District 5.
Commissioner Whitfield here at the Commission office at the PSC.
District 7.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hamilton, I'm in the office at PSC.
Thank you, lady and gentlemen. And District 6, Commissioner Williams is here serving as chair. Attorney Stark, would you please read the docket?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, other commissioners, we're here for the proceeding in docket number 2020-3-E, which concerns the annual review of base rates for fuel cost of Duke Energy Carolinas, LLC. This hearing has been scheduled for September the 10th, 2020 at 10 a.m. Mr. Chairman, I believe the docket to be in order.
Thank you, Attorney Stark. At this time, I will take appearances from the parties.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Katie Brown. I'm in-house counsel for Duke Energy Carolinas. Here with me today is Sam Wellborn. He's outside counsel for the company, the law firm of Robinson Gray. The company appreciates the opportunity to present its case today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman Williams and members of the Commission. This is Bland Holman with the Coastal Conservation League and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And with me today are my colleagues, Kate Lee and Kurt Ebersbach from our Atlanta office, who's been admitted pro hoc vice.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Scott Elliott. I'm here for the South Carolina Energy Users Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. Finally, we have...
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Chris Huber here for the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I also have in the room with me Andrew Bateman.
Oh. Hey, Chris, good to see you.
Good morning.
I like your beard.
Thank you.
Okay.
My wife does as well.
That's good. For the parties, are there any preliminary matters that we need to take up at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is one preliminary matter ORS would like to take up.
Please proceed.
The company, South Carolina Energy Users Committee and ORS have entered into a stipulation that was filed with the Commission on September 3rd. The South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy are not signatories to the stipulation, but filed a letter on September 4th stating they do not object to it. If the stipulation is approved by the Commission, the average monthly bill for a residential customer on rate RS using 1,000 kilowatts would decrease by approximately $6.77 or 5.54%. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would ask that the stipulation be marked for identification and entered into the record as the first hearing exhibit. This concludes the preliminary matter I had.
Okay. So we will mark the stipulation as hearing exhibit number 1. I'm sorry, Attorney Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that that is to be entered into the record, correct, sir?
Right, hearing exhibit 1. Okay. Anyone else?
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a friendly note from our producer. Please turn your cameras on when you are speaking. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, if there are no more preliminary matters, we will proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sam Wellborn here on behalf of the company. If it pleases the commission, we'll first call Mr. Kenneth Church to the stand.
All right, Mr. Church.
Yes, sir. Can you see me?
No, sir.
No.
No. I started video. Not quite sure what else to do.
There's nothing that you can do from what I'm being told. So Attorney Wellborn, would you mind calling your next witness?
Yes, sir. Happy to do so. I would like to call Mr. John Verderami.
Mr. Verderami.
Good morning, Mr. Verderami. Yep.
You would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you, Mr. Verderami. Would you please state your name for the record?
Mr. Verderami, excuse me. I'm sure you're going to tell us the truth and nothing but the truth, but we did not hear an affirmative answer to that question.
Looks like you might be muted.
I see his lips moving, but I do not hear any sound.
I'm sorry. That was my bad. I was on mute.
All
I
right.
affirm I do.
All right. Is that good for you, Madam Court Reporter? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Verderami, would you please state your name for the record?
John Verderami.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Duke Energy, Carolinas. I'm the Vice President of the Fuels and System Optimization Group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 10 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in this proceeding?
I did.
And if I asked you the same questions that were contained within your pre-filed direct testimony this morning, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Verderami's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Attorney Wellborn. Mr. Verderami's pre-filed testimony will be entered into the record as though given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Verderami, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I did.
And do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Verderami's 2 pre-filed exhibits be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Those 2 exhibits will be entered into the record as composite exhibits. 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Verderami, at this time, could you please provide a summary of your testimony?
The purpose of my direct testimony is to describe DEC's fossil fuel purchasing practices, provide fossil fuel costs for the period June 1, 2019 through May 31, 2020, and describe changes forthcoming for the period October 1, 2020 through September 30, 2021. Duke Energy Carolina's average delivered cost of coal per ton for the review period was $85.33 per ton, compared to $84.19 per ton for the prior review period, representing an increase of approximately 1%. This includes an average transportation cost of $29.92 per ton in the review period, compared to $31.49 per ton in the prior review period, representing a decrease of approximately 5%. DEC's average cost of gas purchased for the review period was $3.06 per million MBTU, as compared to $3.60 per million MBTU in the prior review period, representing a decrease of 15%. Cost of gas is inclusive of gas supply, transportation, storage, and financial hedging. DEC's coal burn for the review period was 7.2 million tons, compared to a coal burn of 7.5 million tons in the prior review period, representing a decrease of 5%. Company's natural gas burn for the review period was 128.5 million MBTUs of natural gas in the review period, compared to 137 million MBTUs in the prior review period, representing a decrease of approximately 6%. The net decrease in DEC's overall gas burn was primarily driven by gas to coal switching as a result of the coal rail transportation rate that went into effect March 1, 2019, coupled with decreased demand resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. DEC's projections for the billing period include approximately 8 million tons of coal and 152.1 million MBTUs of natural gas consumed. There is a net increase in DEC's overall natural gas burn projections for the billing period versus the test period. These projections are subject to change due to multiple factors, most notably but not limited to changes in commodity prices and weather-driven demand. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Verderami. If you would please answer any questions of the Commission at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Urban.
Yes, Commissioner Irvin.
Are we at question period yet, or we?
Yes, sir, we are.
Cross-examination. Okay.
Question from the Commissioner, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Verderami, on page 10 and 11 of your pre-filed direct testimony, you discuss environmental compliance. How do you see emissions regulations changing going forward?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I think, I guess part of that will probably be driven by a change of administration, most notably. So I think there's a lot to be seen in the coming year in terms of changes in legislation. But I do also, we're also cognizant and working with the North Carolina Clean Power Plan, and trying to manage and cooperate with that effort.
Okay. Do you see any new emerging technologies that might help meet present and future state and federal emissions requirements?
I think there's several, yes. Most notably, the small modular nuclear reactors, I think, would be a positive development in terms of meeting carbon goals, as well as we're also looking at other natural gas types of alternatives, including hydrogen and biofuels.
Give us an update, please, on any plans to retire the coal-fired plants earlier.
So, we just filed our IRP, just in early September, and so it's unusual IRP in that it sets out 6 different pathways, for discussion, that came from a broad stakeholder group of interest. Yes.
Just real quick, because the IRP is a separate and expected to be contested proceeding, I would caution against getting into the details of that.
I'll withdraw that question. Thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Any other questions from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Vice Chair Belzer.
thank you. Good morning, Mr. Verderami.
Good morning, Commissioner.
On page 5 of your pre-filed testimony, you, in discussing the delivered cost of coal, you mentioned that the cost was inclusive of costs related to buyout of coal contract obligations from April of this year. Can you explain to me what those obligations were?
Yes, ma'am. So the coal buyouts were really a result of a perfect storm, a very mild winter, which drove loads down and coal consumption down, and very historically low gas prices that we saw as a result of that that mild winter. So going into the spring, we were experiencing high inventories at our coal plants, which is our usual kind of mitigation against low burns. And then the impact of COVID on the coal burns was really significant. So while those inventories are a buffer against coal burn volatility, as we dispatched natural gas ahead of coal, we found ourselves in a position where it was difficult to maintain our contractual obligations to receive coal on a ratable basis. So just kind of as data points, in November of 2019, the Carolinas' expected coal burn was about 13.7 million tons for 2020. By March, that burn was down to 9.7 million tons, which we probably still could have managed through our normal mitigations, which are, of course, storing coal on site, deferrals of contracts, exercising flexibility that we have in the contracts. But then in April or in March, we started to see the impact of COVID, and the coal burn projection dropped another 2.4 million tons. So we were down really almost over 40% of the projected burn from November to March. And in actual year-to-date burn, we were down over 60%. And so we exercised the mitigations we could. We deferred or stored about 600,000 tons, but we found ourselves unable to deliver or to receive the coal as the inventories were all up almost to full safe capacity. So the options beyond those no-cost options include either buying out of contracts, defaulting on the contracts, or selling coal, or decrementing coal, such that you change the dispatch price to encourage coal in front of gas. And so selling coal at the time, we were in a situation that was similar to other utilities, that there was really no domestic market for coal. So that really wasn't an option. There was a international market, but the transportation costs involved in selling coal overseas made that a less attractive choice. We did an analysis for decrementing coal to get us at least through this COVID period and through to the summertime. That was a anticipated cost of $61 million, so that was not the least cost. So we were left with negotiating with the coal suppliers just an amount of coal that would get us through to the summertime. And so we sold 1.5 million tons of coal we didn't sell, I'm sorry, we bought out of of 1.5 million tons of coal at a cost of $24.7 million.
So when this is termed a buyout, y'all have paid $24.7 million and didn't get any coal in return because you couldn't take it? Is that a correct understanding?
That was the least cost mitigation, was to not take the coal.
But still paid $24.7 million?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You used the phrase... Go ahead.
If I can just add one thing. We don't generally pay for optionality in the coal contracts, and we've had in the past needed to manage beyond the no-cost mitigations. So I think there are a couple different ways you could pay for this optionality, either contractually or kind of occasionally be forced to pay this option premium in arrears, if you will. And I think it's probably also important to note that customers benefited from these low gas prices and in our ability to dispatch the dual fuel units on gas instead of coal.
Okay, I want to come back to that, but you used a term in your first answer of rateable basis. Can you tell me what that is, please?
Sure. That just means that the coal industry operates and it needs to operate at a very consistent kind of operation. So the rateable term means that we'll take a equal amount of coal through the contract over time. The producers really don't have the flexibility, generally most of them, to stop production or to store coal on site.
Okay. And then in this second part of your response, when you just finished your answer, all right, let me ask you this. Anywhere okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's all I have right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer. Any other questions from commissioners?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I do want to go back.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Mr. Verdami, let me follow up a little bit on that. In your response, you indicated, I don't want to get too deeply into the coal contracts because I know that those are deemed very sensitive and proprietary. But are you telling me that in the contract you're not paying in the contract in case you can't take the coal that is being delivered? You're not paying a hedge, so to speak, in the price of coal that is the contract price. But if it comes to the point where you can't take the coal, then there is a buyout provision where the charge would be at that point.
So these are negotiated, Commissioner. It isn't fixed or memorialized in the contract a specific buyout price. That would be more of an option premium, right? This is really there are several options that we had. Again, we could take the coal and then deal with the inventory after the fact in some other way of delivering it somewhere else or selling it, but or again decrementing the price. But that was, those were not the least cost solutions. So I guess if I'm answering the question correctly, that each individual contract and supplier had a different cost structure that they would accommodate a termination of the contract. So we took the least cost that we could negotiate out of the minimum amount of tons that we needed to not default on the contracts.
And how much did the COVID pandemic play into the need to pursue this least cost option and pursue these buyouts?
Yeah, I would say predominantly, Commissioner. Again, after the mild winter and the extreme, shift from coal to gas that we expected, we still probably could have managed with the inventory situation we had. But the March forecasted burn due to COVID in the second quarter was down 2.4 million tons. So that was the margin for us. We sold 1.2 million tons.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Vice Chair Belzer. Mr. Verderami, I probably want to ask, probably going to come across as asking the same question, but I just want to ask it in my way. Is there no other way to meet service requirements in this particular matter without paying approximately $24 million without receiving anything? Is there any other way that this could be done? I mean, we understand how option contracts work, but it's sort of makes you take a pregnant pause that the least cost option is valued at $24 million.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say we've not met before, so thank you for your service. We didn't meet in the last filing or in the last case. But so to answer your question, yes, there were options, and we executed them to the extent we could on the no-cost options. Again, a lot of these, some of it is just geological that coal producers cannot stop production, especially some long-wall underground mines. If they stop producing or stop mining coal, the mountain kind of collapses behind them. So, and several of them don't have the ability to store on site, which would be no cost. So we pursued, to the extent we could, those no-cost options, which included storing on site at their facilities, as well as extending or deferring the tons that we could into future periods. But beyond that, with the state of the coal market, we could have sold coal, and as I said, unfortunately, there really was no market domestically to sell coal. Now, the market has rebounded a little bit now, but many other suppliers or many other utilities found themselves in the same situation, which kind of forced this glut of coal on the market, which limited the other alternatives, if you will, of being able to sell coal domestically or to the export market. And again, we could have not taken the least cost choice of dispatching coal or dispatching gas ahead of coal and changed the dispatch order. But that was a much more expensive option.
Understood. So essentially, and thank you for answering my question. So essentially what you're saying is that this approximately $24 million option was the best course of action available to you at the time.
Yes, sir. Okay. I will note that when we went in November, when we went as we headed into the winter, which is can be particularly volatile, we were hedged at about 75% of our expected burn. So even I think we were prudently under hedged going into the winter, but the depth of the burn destruction between this mild winter and our shifting to the gas dispatch, and then piled on top of the coal demand destruction from COVID, really was just unmanageable and unforeseeable.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from commissioners?
May I get a clarification?
Sure. Commissioner Howard.
Go to him.
Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Donnie, several years ago, I'm saying in the range of 10, 15 years, transportation was quite contentious. The rails would not negotiate with you. most sites, if not all your sites, only have one rail line, so you didn't have any competition. Then I think it was you that went out and bought like rail cars. Is that still the same situation when you're dealing with transportation, the railways?
Commissioner, the rail transportation is the other side of the coin for sure, in managing volatility in the coal burns. And that is, we do have two, both the CSX and NS railroads serving our stations. One of the stations is dual serve to give us some optionality there. But it is still definitely part of the equation, and will be I think, a continued struggle as we transition away from coal. And so we're working closely with the railroads to be able to manage this volatility that we've, for customers' benefits, I believe, built into the system, and this ability to pivot away from gas or coal. I think the challenge is going to be the railroads recognize that we are not the only utility pivoting away from coal. So the challenge is going to be that we both end up kind of ending our need for transportation with their timing of being out of the coal business. So I think going forward, we'll see continued volatility, and we'll need to manage that contractually with both the railroads and with the coal suppliers. I think you're going to see a contraction in coal suppliers, and I think that will give us some flexibility as we move into the next, the next generation of coal contracts.
Was it you that bought the rail cars, or was that another utility?
So this is probably before my time. We did own rail cars at one point, and we mostly lease our rail cars now.
Okay, just concerned if you had rail cars sitting there in rate base, but that's fine. Thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Vice Chair Belzer.
may I ask a question? I just want some clarification, Mr. Verderami. In response to Chairman Williams' question, you indicated that Duke was hedged at 75% expected burn. Tell me what you mean by that.
So where that was, and these are not financial hedges, I meant we had we were physically contracted for 75% of the expected burn.
Okay, over the winter.
Only for the 2020 period, I'll say. Clarify that.
Okay, okay. That's what I thought, but I just wanted clarification. Thank you very much. Well, I'll worry about the time, but just wanted to make sure I was understanding it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, any more questions from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Verderami, just like to ask you, I guess, kind of a future question, maybe going forward, not as it pertains to this test year period, but going forward, as you described, the supply constricting or I don't think the word, I don't know if that's the word you use, but getting smaller. What can the company do going forward in the future to keep something like this from happening again? This time it's COVID. Next time it might be something else that causes a unexpected sharp decline, unexpected decline in demand, and as you have less, as your suppliers constrict or get smaller, as you say, and and the rail companies get out of the business of hauling a large bulk item like this, like coal. What can the company do to mitigate this? Because it looks like to me, as you have less supply, or your suppliers are contracting or getting smaller, as you said, and your carriers, be it the railroads or have moved on to other commodities and other things to transport. Certainly, as Commissioner Belser said, these contracts are delicate things, but what do you think the company that Duke could do in the future to mitigate facing something like this again? And I know nobody could have forecasted COVID, but none of us can forecast what the next, hopefully not, but what the next disaster might be.
So it's an excellent question, and COVID in particular, I think every time we find ourselves in this situation, we go back and reflect on what we might have done, differently with perfect hindsight. But we have, over the last couple of years, beginning to recognize the volatility we're facing in the coal burn and gas burn worlds. Again, we built this flexibility in to customers' benefits, but occasionally it does have implications, like being forced to make these coal buyouts. But so I think there's several things we're doing to adapt, I think, the future fuel procurement part of this anyway, to an increased volatility. And we're going to look to, from a contracting side and a modeling side and potentially even a dispatch side. So from the contracting side, we are going to, in this next generation of contracts, and this is across jurisdictions. This is not particular to the Carolinas. In fact, it's even more. We've had even more disruption in the RTO markets, where you're price driven and not supply driven or not demand driven. And so as we negotiate contracts going forward, we're going to be very cognizant of building in more flexibility to the contracts and the ability to adapt to changing burns. And that, I think, will drive us towards the more better positioned suppliers, whether they are more financially sound or they just have operations that can adapt to that kind of flexibility. So we're doing that. We've started. The first round is in the Midwest, and we're building in much more flexibility into the delivery part of it, the rateability part of it, if you will. And then on the modeling side, we've recognized that the rates need to be set at a certain point in time with a certain set of facts, and we'll continue to do that. But we're now recognizing that that fuel procurement might be more successful planning to a range of outcomes rather than just one point in figure time. So we're developing new modeling strategies that look at hundreds of scenarios, and we'll now start contracting to the most likely scenarios for a contract flexibility for the most likely scenarios, and then use things like spot market purchases or coal sales when we find ourselves in these tail events like COVID or whatever the next tail event may be, whether it's short coal or long coal, because I think the volatility even we're seeing this year has changed the coal burn from what we expected earlier in the year until what we see going forward in 21 and 22. And so we're going to need to look at and be prepared, I think, for what those tail eventualities might be. And again, it'll be some of the same strategies we use now, and some might be even other strategies that help us in the long run not find ourselves in a situation where we're facing an inability to take a contractual supply, even at a more flexible rate. And that may include looking at some glide path or some signposts that say we're heading on a path towards a shortfall of coal or a surplus of coal, and changing the dispatch order ahead of time. Now, that's a paradigm shift, and we're not prepared to do it yet. But in general, I think the modeling will give us ability to create contracts for the proper length with the proper base amount of volume that we can manage through the vast majority of these demand disruptions.
Thank you, Mr.
The railroad is a different issue, but we are working closely with the railroad. So the more flexibility we build into the coal contracts, we really will need to be met with the same amount of flexibility from the railroads. And they understand this, and our discussions with them, they're committed to this transition and this glide path. It may take just a different strategy in terms of how we utilize the stations and how we supply the stations, so that maybe this rateability construct needs to change a little bit and become a little more seasonal. But we're always going to have impacts of weather, and so again, traditionally we've gone out for RFPs in the fall, but we've also found the most volatility in burn to be in the fall. So we'll also be looking towards different periods, perhaps maybe more spot tons, which expose customers to risk as well. That's the balance here of making sure we have enough supply without overpaying for flexibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Verderami. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitfield.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Verderami gets off the stand, may I ask a couple of questions of Mr. Wellborn?
Absolutely, Vice Chair.
Well, and to Duke's witnesses, they need to. Mr. Wellborn, you're familiar with SC Code Annotated 5827-865, which is the fuel statute, are you not?
I am, yes, ma'am.
And I understand that there's a stipulation here, and I understand that the ORS and the parties get to conduct discovery with the utility, and they see a lot of information that we don't have. I have a little bit of problem with where we are on this $24.7 million. The statute does say that the Commission shall disallow for recovery any fuel costs that it finds without just cause to be the result of failure of the utility, resulting in unreasonable fuel cost, or resulting in the utility to make every effort to minimize fuel cost, or any decision of the utility resulting in unreasonable fuel cost. Now, I understand Mr. Verderami's explanation as he's given to us. We have nothing that I'm aware of, and I would ask that Mr. Verderami or any of your witnesses point out what we've got filed where we can judge that $24.1 million to be the most prudent or the best response to this issue, that the buyout of the coal contract was the best. And I understand that he's testified to that. I would like some documentation that supports that testimony, if we could. I don't like asking for late filed exhibits, but I want you all to be aware that I have big concern over this issue. I'm also a bit concerned that it was really presented in testimony as a pretty innocuous phrase in a sentence. So what can we do in the context of this hearing to help me get satisfied that this $24.7 million doesn't need to come up under that section I just read to you out of 865F? I'm trying to give you an opportunity. I'm giving you an opportunity here, okay?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, and I appreciate that, and I'll affirm your understanding that this information was fully part of the discovery process, that other parties asked about and received information about these costs, and Mr. Verderami, as you stated, has testified as to it, and presented the company's position that this was the least cost option for the utility in this circumstance. And given the stipulations in this case, I would have to assume that the other parties came to the same understanding I would have to review the stipulations to see whether we would be precluded from filing a late filed exhibit. I don't think we would. But to the extent that would be helpful for the commission from a fact-finding perspective, I believe that we could put something together for you and filed. I don't know if that satisfies you or not, but I do think that you know, this being a litigated proceeding with other parties who have full discovery rights and who you know, utilize those discovery rights, you know, and that we were ultimately able to reach a stipulation with the parties, you know, is helpful from one perspective. So, what would you like to see from us, Commissioner Belzer? Would a late filed exhibit be helpful?
It would be, and I know we're under a short time frame here because I think we are set to rule on this matter next week at the agenda meeting, I believe, because these rates go into effect October 1, do they not?
That's right.
Okay. I am not discounting the stipulation, but even though there is a stipulation, this commission needs the factual basis on which to make our determinations. And just because there's a stipulation, I don't think precludes the evidence to support the points of those stipulations. So I don't recall anything in the stipulation that would prevent a late filed exhibit. I know we'll probably get to a break. You may want to confer with the other parties. I'm not trying to upset the stipulation, but I am trying to make sure that this commission has the factual basis to either approve or not approve that stipulation. That's where I'm coming from.
I understand, and I would be very surprised too if the other parties would object to us making a late filed exhibit as we're discussing. But certainly that's something that I can discuss with them offline and see if we can't come to some understanding about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it looks like Mr. Church's video feed may be working now. If it pleases the commission, and if you're done with Mr. Verderami, we can try Mr. Church again.
Absolutely. Mr. Verderami, you may step down from the stand. Attorney Wellborn, call your next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would call Mr. Kenneth Church to the stand.
Mr. Church, please take the stand.
Uh-oh, I'm getting the error message for him again.
Getting the error message again. I'm going to log out and log back in. So, sorry about that.
All right. Attorney Wilburn, please call your next witness.
Yes, sir. The company would next call Mr. Steve Emmel to the stand.
Mr. Emmel, please take the stand.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Emmel.
Mr. Emmel, would you please raise your right hand?
Mr. Chairman, before we, well, it'll come back after the break. Never mind, Mr. Welborn's going to check. I'm just asking whether or not we need a late file exhibit held, but he'll let us know after the break, I reckon. Thank you.
No problem. Vice Chair Belzer. Madam Court Reporter, please proceed.
Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Emmel. Would you please state your name for the record?
Steve Emmel.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Duke Energy. I'm the Vice President of Fleet Transition Strategy.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 11 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
And if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would be.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Emmel's pre-file direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Emmel's pre-filed testimony will be entered into the record as giving orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Emmel, would you please provide a summary of your testimony at this time?
Yes, sir. The purpose of my testimony is to describe DEC's hydro generation portfolio, discuss the performance of DEC's fossil hydro facilities during the review period of June 1st, 2019 through May 31st, 2020, provide information on significant fossil hydro outages that occurred during the review period, and discuss DEC's environmental compliance efforts. DEC's fossil hydro generation portfolio consists of approximately 14,976 megawatts generating capacity. This includes 6,764 megawatts of coal-fired generation, 3,219 megawatts of hydroelectric generation, 2,665 megawatts of natural gas combustion turbine generation, 2,116 megawatts of natural gas combined cycle generation, 170 megawatts of steam natural gas, and 30 megawatts of solar. The company's fossil hydro units operated efficiently and reliably during the review period. DEC's total system generation was 97.3 million megawatt hours, of which approximately 38% was provided by the fossil hydro fleet. The breakdown includes 19% contribution from the coal-fired stations, approximately 15% contribution from combined cycle operations, 1% contribution from the combustion turbine fleet, 2% contribution from the hydro facilities, and 0.2% from the solar facilities, and approximately 1% from the steam natural gas facility, Lee Unit 3. DEC has installed pollution control equipment on existing and new generation resources in order to meet various emission reduction requirements. Overall, the type and quantity of emission-reducing chemicals varies depending on generation output, the chemical constituents in the fuel burned, and/or the level of emission reduction required. DEC manages the impacts of changes to the fuel mix and/or coal burn due to competing fuels and utilization of non-traditional coals. The goal is to effectively comply with emissions regulations and provide the most efficient total cost operating solution. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Emmel. If you'd please answer any questions of the commissioners at this time.
Certainly.
Any questions from the commissioners? Mr. Emmel, I have a couple of questions for you. On page 10 and 11 of your pre-filed direct testimony, you discuss environmental compliance, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How do you see emissions regulations changing going forward?
Well, the one potential would be a carbon regulation or a carbon tax. That certainly has been discussed quite a bit. We have restrictive water regulations on the horizon as well. Air emissions, I think, are fairly stable right now in terms of regulation. So I could see some, stricter water regulations and of course, the potential for carbon regulation.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. Is it beyond dispute that cleaner energy equals higher cost to ratepayers?
I don't know that that's beyond dispute. The price of current technology that's cleaner in terms of renewable resources is still predominantly more expensive. But I think, again, future, as the trend has been cost reduction in these new technologies. And of course, the natural gas generation is cleaner as compared to coal generation, and it is much more efficient and at less cost as we continue to develop that.
Thank you, Mr. Emmel. Those are all my questions. Any questions from the commissioners? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It looks like Mr. Church might be available again. We could try calling him to the stand if it pleases the commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can you guys see me this time?
Mr. Emmel, could you please stand aside?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, Chairman Williams.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Emmel. Appreciate your testimony. Attorney Welborn, please call your next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was planning to call Mr. Church, but it looks like we've got an error message there again. So the company would next call Mr. Steve Katz.
Mr. Capps, would you please take the stand?
Yes, sir. Is the video coming through, Sam?
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Capps, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Capps, if you would, please state your name for the record.
Name's Stephen Capps.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Employed by Duke Energy, and my role is Senior Vice President of South Carolina Nuclear Operations.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 13 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, sir, I did.
If I asked you the same questions this morning that were in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Capps' pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Capps' pre-filed testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Capps, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 2 publicly filed exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, sir, I did.
And do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Capps' 2 publicly filed exhibits be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mark Mr. Capps' composite exhibits as Exhibit 3. And please enter them into the record as hearing Exhibit 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Capps also prepare or cause to be prepared 1 confidentially filed exhibit that was attached to your pre-filed direct testimony.
Yes, sir.
And do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Capps' confidentially filed exhibit be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit and that it remain under seal.
Capps' confidential exhibit will be entered into the record as Exhibit 4 and will remain under seal.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Capps, would you please provide a summary of your testimony at this time?
Yes, sir, I will. The purpose of my testimony is to describe and discuss the performance of DEC's nuclear fleet during the review period of June 1st, 2019 through May 31st, 2020. DEC operated its nuclear stations in a reasonable and prudent manner during the review period, supplying 62% of the power generated. The 7 nuclear units operated at an actual system average capacity factor of 95.1% and a net nuclear capacity factor, excluding reasonable outage time, of 101.24%. Additionally, for the 20th consecutive year, DEC's 7 nuclear units have achieved an actual system average capacity factor exceeding 90%. The company's nuclear fleet has a history of top quartile performance. Industry data for 2019 ranked Duke Energy's nuclear fleet favorably when compared to the other domestic nuclear fleets, using key performance indicators in the areas of personal safety, radiological dose, manual and automatic shutdowns, capacity factor, force loss rate, industry performance index, and total operating cost. On a larger industry basis, using data for 2019 from the Electric Utility Cost Group, McGuire, Catawba, and Oconee all ranked in the top quartile in total operating cost among the 57 U.S. nuclear stations reporting. These performance results support DEC's continued commitment to achieving high performance without compromising safety and reliability. There were 5 refueling outages completed during the review period: fall 2019 outages at Catawba Unit 2 and Oconee Unit 2, followed by spring 2020 outages at McGuire Unit 2, Oconee Unit 3, and Catawba Unit 1. All 5 refueling outages were successfully completed within the scheduled allocation. Additionally, DEC experienced 1 brief forced outage during the review period at Catawba Unit 1 in February 2020. Following these outages, the units were safely and efficiently returned to service, and I believe the units were operated reasonably and prudently, and that our operations were conducted in a way that minimized our fuel cost. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Capps. If you would please make yourself available for any questions of the Commission.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Randall.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Capps, welcome. Good to see you again. You know, I've always got a question or a statement about the nuclear plant, especially Catawba and McGuire, since most of the power in my house comes from those. And I've been keeping up with them for about 25 years now. So, you know, the nuclear plants are operating at a very high capacity factor and providing, you know, non-emissions or very low emissions electricity, and they're designed to run wide open. So I know when they were the life was extended. My question is, running wide open like they do and is providing constant power like they do, does that have a positive effect or a detrimental effect on the long-term operation of these, especially when you look to relicense again?
I understand, Mr. Randall, and I think there's a couple of aspects of that. One piece would just be relative to the operation of the station. The way the plant is set up, the equipment is tuned, and our experience base, the plant is optimized to operate at 100% power. So we're very much geared to optimize the plant operating at that level. And then from a reliability or a longevity perspective, we just factor that into our maintenance activities relative to the scope and the frequency of the preventive maintenance that we do on the major plant equipment to ensure that it remains reliable. So I mean, I certainly think we can operate the plants to the end of the relicense period with due consideration to any maintenance or replacement activities that we had to do to ensure the reliability.
Good deal. Thank you very much, Mr. Capps. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Randall. Yes, Vice Chair Belzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Capps. Thank you for your testimony this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
5 refueling outages in the review period, that seems like a lot. Is it normally that many?
Yes, ma'am, that's pretty typical. I went back a few weeks ago and was looking at the three previous years for the entire fleet. We had 5 outages one year, 8 outages the next year, 7 outages the next year. So the 7 or 8 total, a little over half being DEC. That's pretty typical.
Refueling.
McGuire,
You're saying you had 7 or 8 refueling outages in a period?
yeah, well, but I was thinking annually, and that's between the collective DEC and DEP. So for the DEC specific, in a 1-year period, 4 or 5 would be a typical number. A Catawba or a McGuire unit has to be refueled every 18 months, and the Oconee units have to be refueled every 24 months.
Okay. And that was my next question, because it looks like Catawba 2 and McGuire 2 had refueling during this review period, and they're scheduled for the next period as well. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's every 18 months.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony today. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer. Any other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Capps, it's good to have you with us today, and I appreciate your testimony. Congratulate Duke on its safety record and performance record. I believe that your decision to apply for relicensure will be a good one. You know, we don't talk a lot about nuclear being a part of the clean energy equation that often, but it clearly is. And I want to commend you on your work, and particularly your numbers in terms of being one of the best companies in the industry as it relates to percentage of time that you're up and running. So this is great news. I'm wondering, could you give us briefly an update on the relicensure applications that you filed?
Yes, sir, I can. So relative to subsequent license renewal, we had announced that our intent is to pursue subsequent license, an additional 20-year license for the entire nuclear fleet. So from a DEC perspective, certainly for Oconee, Catawba, and McGuire, we are actively working on the Oconee subsequent license renewal. They'll be first. We're actually on the tail end of putting together that license amendment application. Our intent is to submit it in the first or second quarter of 2021. So we'll do Oconee first, and then we'll roll to Robinson, and then we would do Brunswick, and then we would do Catawba and McGuire, and Catawba and McGuire are very similar plants, so we would pair them up and essentially do them in parallel, but with a 1 to 2 year separation between the submittals. Once we submit Oconee, we'll roll straight into Robinson.
And the other thing that nuclear power does is it helps us with meeting the peak demand periods. Is that correct? It gives us backup for renewables that when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, we've got a safe and reliable source of 24/7 nuclear. Your group.
Yes, sir. It absolutely provides a core base for us to work around from a generation perspective.
Appreciate your testimony today, sir. Thank you. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Any more questions from commissioners?
Mr.
Commissioner Hamilton, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you. Mr. Capps,
Yes, sir.
happy to have you with us today, sir. And I really don't have a question, but being from the PD, I was anxious to hear that Robinson was next in line. That's always good news for our part of the country. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, I understand. And Mr. Hamilton, you'll kind of a perspective on Robinson's view of this. One of the mantras that they have relative to operating the station today is 2030 and beyond. So that beyond is their subsequent license period, and they're operating the plant today with the clear intention of operating it 20 additional years.
That'll probably get me back to the Rotary Club one more time.
I understand.
Thank you, sir.
All right, if there are no more questions from commissioners,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. One quick question for you, Mr. Capps. You were discussing with Commissioner Belser about the refueling periods, and you talked about Catawba and McGuire, and then you talked about the Oconee stations being on a longer cycle, a 24-month cycle. That was able to be extended when you all did your upgrades to the Oconee units several years ago, and did your big upgrades and digitalizing and other things up at Oconee, and I believe that's what enabled you to have a longer fuel cycle. Is that correct?
It kind of happened in parallel from a timing standpoint, Commissioner Whitfield, at a very similar time, and the upgrades certainly helped with ensuring the reliability of the station for that longer operating period, 24 months versus 18 months. But the actual extension of the cycle is kind of it's kind of its own analysis to look at being able to reliably extend the run periods and the testing periods of all the equipment. And then there's a core design piece that's also a key component of it. Being able, I mean, if you think about all the energy you've got in a reactor core, being able to do the analysis to show the core and the support systems are good for that longer period. But it all happened kind of in parallel at the same point in time.
I was thinking. Thank you, sir. All I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitfield. Anything else for Mr. Capps? Okay, Mr. Capps, you may step down from the stand.
Thank you.
At this time, we will take a 10-minute break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us after that brief break. We will continue where we left off. Attorney I'm sorry, I have one matter to take up before we proceed. Attorney Welborn, did you get an opportunity to discuss the late file exhibit with the parties?
Yes, sir. I expect that we'll be prepared to file that sometime tomorrow, if that pleases the commission.
Will that work with you, Vice Chair Belzer? Okay, we need to reserve an exhibit number for that late filed exhibit. Number 5. Late filed exhibit 5. All right, Attorney Welborn, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The company would call Mr. Kenneth Church.
Mr. Church, please take the stand.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Church.
Mr. Church, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Church. It's good to see you. Would you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name's Kenneth Church.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corp. In the capacity of General Manager of Nuclear Fuels Engineering.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 8 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, sir, I did.
And if I asked you the same questions that were contained within your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Church's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Church's pre-filed testimony will be entered into the record as given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Church, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits?
No changes.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Church's 2 pre-filed exhibits be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Church's composite exhibits will be marked hearing exhibit 6 and will be entered into the record as the same.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Church, would you please provide a summary of your testimony?
Sure. The purpose of my testimony is to provide information regarding DC's nuclear fuel purchasing practices, provide costs for the June 1, 2019 through May 31, 2020 review period, and describe changes for the October 1, 2020 through September 30, 2021 billing period. DEC's nuclear fuel procurement practices involve computing near and long-term consumption forecasts, establishing nuclear system inventory levels, projecting required annual fuel purchases, requesting proposals from qualified suppliers, negotiating a portfolio of long-term contracts from diverse sources of supply, and monitoring deliveries against contract commitments. Consistent with industry practices, long-term contracts are used extensively to cover forward requirements and ensure security of supply. DEC's portfolio of diversified contract pricing yielded an average unit cost of $42.14 per pound for uranium concentrates during the review period, representing a decrease of 15% per pound from the prior review period. The average unit cost of DEC's purchases of enrichment services during the review period decreased 15% to $106.81 per separative work unit. Delivered costs for fabrication and conversion services have a limited impact on the overall fuel expense rate, given that the dollar amounts for these purchases represent a substantially smaller percentage of DEC's total direct fuel cost relative to uranium concentrates or enrichment. Because fuel is typically expensed over 2 to 3 operating cycles, roughly 3 to 6 years, DEC's nuclear fuel expense in the upcoming billing period will be determined by the cost of fuel assemblies loaded into the reactors during the review period, as well as prior periods. The average fuel expense is expected to increase from 0.594 cents per kilowatt hour incurred in the review period to approximately 0.60 cents per kilowatt hour in the billing period. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, sir. If you now please make yourself available for any questions from the commissioners.
Questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Church, just one for you. What do you see the coronavirus pandemic having on the availability of either uranium or any processed fuels? Have you seen any adverse effects on that, or do you project?
So we have not seen, we have not had any contract deliveries made. However, there has been some impacts to the uranium market. A large mine in Canada, Northern Territory, it was shut down for several months, Cigar Lake. So that was a reduced amount of supply available to the market. Also in Kazakhstan, they have reduced the amount of well field development they have at their in situ leach mines, which is likely to cause a reduction in supply available to the market out later in the year. So we have seen some impacts on the total supply globally to the marketplace, and we've also had a very brief shutdown of a conversion facility in Canada. But you know, the prices did react, spot prices, to the reduced supply, but the spot prices have increased, but now are decreasing because those particular issues appear to be fairly well managed. Not you know, long-term impacts as of this point.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitfield. Any other questions from commissioners? Hearing none. Any questions from the parties? Attorney Welborn, you call your next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'm going to turn things over to my co-counsel, Ms. Katie Brown.
Okay, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Brown, before you proceed, we need to stand Mr. Church aside.
Okay.
Mr. Church, you can leave the witness stand. Proceed, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. The company would next call Mr. Jason Martin to the stand.
Mr. Martin, please take the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Martin, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, would you state your name for the record?
Yes, Jason Martin.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Duke Energy Corporation, and I am the Director of Strategy and Policy for Distributed Energy Technologies for South Carolina.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 14 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony this morning, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Martin's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Martin's pre-filed direct testimony shall be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared one exhibit that was attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No, I did not.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Martin's pre-filed exhibit be entered as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Martin's pre-filed exhibit will be marked as hearing exhibit 7 and will be entered into the record as the same.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, if you would please Mr. Martin, would you please provide a summary of your testimony at this time?
Yes, thank you. The purpose of my testimony is to provide support for the Distributed Energy Resource Program, or DERP, costs that are incorporated into the proposed fuel factors by Witness McGee. I'll describe the nature of the cost as well as any changes made to the DERP portfolio since the 2019 fuel proceeding. DEC incurred DERP costs totaling $6,697,665 in the review period, anticipates incurring $9,780,091 during the estimated period, and projects to incur $15,183,245 in the billing period. These costs represent the avoided and incremental costs associated with the company's approved DERP offerings, including the purchase power agreements executed to fulfill the company's utility-scale solar goals under Act 236, Distributed Energy Resource Net Energy Metering Incentive, the Solar Rebate Program, Shared Solar Program, carrying cost on the deferred solar rebate amounts, the NEM avoided capacity cost, the NEM meter cost, and general and administrative expenses, including incremental label cost as direct result of DERP, IT, and billing enhancements, and other administrative costs associated with delivering these programs to customers. DEC has updated the 2020 value of the NEM distributed energy resources to $0.02868 per kilowatt hour for schedules RES and RTOUD, $0.02871 per kilowatt hour for schedules SGS, and $0.02871 per kilowatt hour for all other schedules. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. If you would please answer any questions from the commission.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner questions. Mr. Martin, I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, Commissioner.
In your calculation of the value of NEM distributed energy resources in Table 5 of your pre-filed direct testimony, certain components have significantly reduced the total value year over year. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That has happened.
Okay. Marginal capacity costs have been eliminated this year as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you explain why a value was assigned to it last year but not this year?
Yes, sir. The avoided cost proceeding that was established last year, where we've now concluded the calculation and the methodology for avoided cost, those changes and those values and the attributed solar profile has driven that value down to its filed amount.
Okay. The ancillary services component results in a reduction to the total NEM value. But what factors go into the calculation of the ancillary services value, and why does it result in a reduction?
Yes, sir. In our filing, the ancillary services value is attributed again to the avoided cost proceeding, where the system integration charge has been applied to solar uptake for the system, and that value is included in the ancillary services.
Okay. Thank you for answering my questions, Mr. Martin. Any other questions from commissioners?
Yes, sir.
All right. If there are no more questions from commissioners or parties, Mr. Martin, you can stand aside.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
Absolutely, Mr. Martin. Attorney Wilburn, please call your next witness. I'm sorry, Attorney Brown, excuse me. Please call your next witness.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The company would next call Ms. Kimberly McGee to the stand.
Ms. McGee, would you please take the stand?
Ms. McGee, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Ms. McGee, would you state your name for the record?
Kimberly McGee.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed with Duke Energy Carolinas. I'm a rates manager in the Rates and Regulatory Strategy Department.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 17 pages of amended direct testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed amended direct testimony this morning, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Ms. McGee's pre-filed amended direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. McGee's amended pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McGee, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 13 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed amended direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Ms. McGee's pre-filed exhibits be entered as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Ms. McGee's pre-filed composite exhibits will be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 7. 8, excuse me, hearing exhibit number 8. 8, not 7.
Thank you. Ms. McGee, would you please provide a summary of your testimony?
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner Williams and members of the Commission.
Good morning.
The purpose of my testimony is to provide DEC's actual costs related to fuel, capacity, environmental, and its Distributed Energy Resource Program, also known as DERP. Cost data for June the 1st, 2019 through May 31st, 2020. The projected fuel, capacity-related costs, environmental, and DERP cost information for June the 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, and DEC's proposed fuel factors by customer class for October the 1st, 2020 through September the 30th, 2021. DEC's recommended total base fuel rate for the billing period is 1.5025 cents per kWh. This base fuel rate is composed of two things. One, the projected billing period base rate component of 1.5906 to recover the South Carolina retail share of the $1.4 billion of projected system fuel expense. And two, the true-up component of negative 0.0881 cents per kWh to return the projected $18.9 million over recovery as of September the 30th, 2020. Environmental, capacity-related costs, and DERP avoided costs are allocated to the residential, general service, and industrial rate classes based upon the firm coincident peak demand. Variable environmental costs and the cost of emission allowances allocated to the South Carolina retail jurisdiction during the review period were approximately $5.3 million, with an expected $1.2 million over collection balance at September the 30th, 2020. South Carolina's retail portion of the forecasted cost for the billing period is approximately $6.1 million. The environmental cost components are 0.0207 cents per kWh for residential, 0.0278 cents per kWh for general service, and 0.0204 cents per kWh for industrial. Capacity-related costs allocated to the South Carolina retail jurisdiction during the review period were approximately $19.1 million, with an expected environmental under-recovery balance of approximately $408,000 at September the 30th, 2020. South Carolina's retail portion forecasted for the billing period is $16.4 million. The capacity-related cost components are 0.0836 cents per kWh for residential, 0.0910 cents per kWh for general service, and 0.0657 cents per kWh for industrial. The expected DERP avoided cost over collection balance at September the 30th, 2020 is almost $121,000. South Carolina's retail portion forecasted for the billing period is approximately $752,000. This results in DERP avoided cost factors of 0.0034 cents per kWh for residential, 0.0033 cents per kWh for general service, and 0.0024 cents per kWh for industrial. The company's DERP incremental costs were approximately $6.3 million during the review period and $2.6 million for the estimated period. The expected DERP incremental cost over collection balance at September the 30th, 2020 is approximately $2.7 million. Total DERP incremental cost of $12.1 million are projected for the billing period. DEC allocated 100% of DERP incremental cost to residential, general service, and industrial rate classes based upon the firm coincident peak demand. The proposed DERP per account charge, including the true-up component per month of 64 cents, $2.90, and $100 for South Carolina residential, general, and industrial customers, excluding GRT, are within the statutory per-account cost caps established in Act 236. The company's actual fuel-related, and DERP costs incurred are reasonable and reflect DEC's continuing efforts to maintain reliable service and an economical generation mix, thereby minimizing the total cost of providing service to DEC's South Carolina retail customers. The impact of the rates set forth in the company's filing for an average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month is a decrease of $6.81 or 5.6%. Impacts for general service, lighting, and industrial customers vary by customer, but are decreases of approximately 5.6%, 3.1%, and 9.8% respectively. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. McGee. If you would, please answer any questions of the Commission.
Commissioner questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ms. McGee. Good to have you with us again.
Good morning.
Near the end of your testimony, or direct testimony, you talk about, I guess on page 16, you talk about the key drivers impacting the proposed fuel factor. And you talk about a secondary driver being the decreasing commodity prices in the forecast period. But you also talk about, the overcollection due to the expected overcollection as of September 30th, and you talk about rather than an undercollection as reflected in the existing fuel rates. I guess my question to you is, what about how is customer demand affected? We've heard all the things about with folks working virtually. We've seen shifts in the type of usage, more residential during business hours than you normally would see, and those types of things. But if you could share your answers, your thoughts on the impacts on effects on customer demand.
While we have seen impacts to customer demand as far as shifting between customers, now we have to keep in mind that the customer demand that we're looking at is 2019. So,
Right.
That doesn't really impact our allocation process, but in general, for what we've seen in 2020 is that there's a shift more, there's an increase in residential, and there is a decrease in our general service and our industrial customers. So next year, I would expect to see the proponents of the demand percentages to change between classes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitfield. Any other commissioner questions? All right, Ms. McGee, you may stand aside.
Thank you.
Attorney Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all for the company.
All right. ORS going to call any witnesses?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, ORS calls as his first witness Anthony Brazino.
Mr. Brazino, please take the stand.
Mr. Brazino, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brazino, please state your full name and occupation.
My name is Anthony D. Brazino, and I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as an audit manager.
Are you the same Anthony D. Brazino who pre-filed 18 pages of direct testimony in this case on August 20th, 2020?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony?
I have one correction on page 1, line 13. Since the filing of ORS's direct testimony, my position has changed from senior auditor to audit manager. Otherwise, I have no other changes or corrections to my pre-filed testimony.
Did you also prepare 10 exhibits marked Audit Exhibit ADB1 through Audit Exhibit ADB10, which were filed with your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or edits to those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Anthony Brazino, with the one correction noted from the stand, be entered into the record of this case and is given orally from the stand, and that Mr. Brazino's audit exhibits ADB1 through ADB10 be marked as a composite hearing exhibit and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Brazino's corrected pre-filed testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. Mr. Brazino's exhibit ADD1 through ADD10 will be marked and entered into the record as composite exhibit, and that we're at 9, as hearing exhibit 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brazino, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please present your summary for the commission?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to explain the scope of ORS's examination of Duke Energy Carolina's books and records as they pertain to the company's operation of the fuel adjustment clause in the current filing and present the results of our examination. This examination included the review of base fuel, environmental, capacity, DERP incremental, and DERP avoided costs. ORS examined and verified the monthly over and under recovery balances as recorded by the company for the actual period that ended May 2020. ORS recalculated the balances for the estimated period that ended September 2020. My direct testimony also explains the 10 exhibits that I sponsored for this hearing. Prior to the hearing, ORS, Duke Energy Carolinas, and the South Carolina Energy Users Committee
into a stipulation in which the stipulating parties agreed with the adjustments and ending balances for the actual and estimated periods. This concludes my summary.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brazino is now available for questions from the commission.
Commissioner questions for Mr. Brazino.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brazino, welcome. I have a quick question on Exhibit ADB-4 of your pre-filed testimony. It's the cost of fuel burned in column 2. It looks like it declined, as a consistent decline through the year. In your audit, what was the cause of that? Just curious.
Some of that would be seasonality. Some of that would be dependent upon which units were running and not running based on any outages that were occurring. And it would also depend on if the power that they were trying to purchase was cheaper than what they could generate themselves. And for our review, we do actually sample test and verify back to invoices the power that's purchased.
Okay, so even seasonality, it looked like it's pretty consistently dropping the whole time. So, but I see we start June and end in the next May. So, okay, I got you. I appreciate your answer. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Belzer.
Good morning, Mr. Brazino.
Good morning.
Congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have you been listening to the proceeding this morning, specifically the Duke witnesses? And you heard that I had some questions related to the buyout of coal contract obligations?
Yes, ma'am.
Where in the audit exhibits of ORS would such those buyouts appear? I imagine they're embedded somewhere in a number, but where would it appear?
Some of that you would see as part of my Exhibit 1. So the buyouts happened in April, so you can see there that the $83 million is inclusive of that actual amount. These are still system level at this point.
Okay, that's under...
Additionally, you would...
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was saying additionally on Exhibit 2, you would be able to see the increase in April as well for the invoice cost per ton that shows up on that exhibit for the same month of April.
So ORS did examine that $24.7 million, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did, and I don't know if this is you or another witness, who at ORS would be able to speak to any determination that ORS may have made that those were reasonable costs that did not unreasonably increase fuel prices?
ORS witness Sandinato would be the best witness to address that for you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer. Any other questions for Mr. Brazino? Hearing none, Mr. Brazino, you can stand aside.
Thank you, sir.
ORS, please call your next witness.
Mr. Chairman, ORS calls as its next witness Brandon S. Bickley.
Mr. Bickley, please take the witness stand.
Mr. Bickley, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I'm going to pass the gavel to Vice Chairman Belzer.
you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Huber, would you like to present your witness?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Bickley, please state your full name and occupation.
My name is Brandon Sinclair Bickley. I'm a regulatory analyst with the Energy Operations Division of ORS.
Are you the same Brandon S. Bickley who pre-filed 6 pages of direct testimony in this case on August 20th, 2020?
Yes, I am.
Did you also prepare 6 exhibits marked BSB 1 through BSB 6, which were filed along with your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony or exhibits?
No.
Madam Vice Chairman, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Brandon S. Bickley be entered into the record of this case as given orally from the stand, and that Mr. Bickley's exhibits BSB 1 through BSB 6 be marked as a composite hearing exhibit and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Bickley's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, and Mr. Bickley's pre-filed exhibits BSB 1 through BSB 6 will be marked as a composite hearing exhibit, will be identified as hearing exhibit number 10, and entered into the record of this case.
Thank you. Mr. Bickley, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please present your summary for the Commission?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chairman and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to set forth ORS's recommendations resulting from ORS's examination and review of Duke Energy Carolina's power plant operations used in the generation of electricity to meet the company's South Carolina retail customer requirements during the review period. ORS examined various fuel and performance-related documents as part of its review. These documents address the company's electric generation and power plant outage and maintenance activities. In preparation for this proceeding, ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports, including power plant performance data, unit outages, and generation statistics. ORS attended, via virtual participation, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's 2019 annual assessment meeting for the Catawba, McGuire, and nuclear stations. ORS met remotely with company personnel from various departments to discuss and review the company's electric generation, power plant outages, and maintenance activities. In addition, ORS monitored electric generation statistics through industry and governmental publications. Based on ORS's review, the company made reasonable efforts to maximize unit availability and minimize fuel costs. The company's maintenance schedules and projected performance data for its power plants were found to be reasonable. All hydro, coal, natural gas, and nuclear plant outages were reviewed and found to be reasonable by ORS. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Bickley. Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Bickley is available for questions from the Commission.
The chairman is on the bench and will resume take over the gavel.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer. Commissioner questions? I have a question for you, Mr. Bickley. Mr. Bickley?
Yes, Commissioner.
On exhibit BSB 4, the forced Catawba 1 outage was caused by a loss of generator field, correct?
Apologize, one moment, I'm pulling it now.
Take your time.
Yes, Commissioner.
Could you please explain what a loss of generator field is and why it caused a forced outage?
So if you give me one moment, Commissioner, I'll pull up my notes. I do want to preface this with the majority of outage information is confidential. So I will give you as best of an answer as I can without trying to divulge any confidential information.
Understood. Do the best you can.
And I apologize, my laptop is going a little slow, Commissioner. and as I stated before, a lot of this information is confidential, but the Unit 1 exciter brushes that are used in the main generator shorted and resulted in some issues which caused the reactor trip. And as a result of that reactor trip, failure investigation was performed by the company. Several procedures and maintenance practices were being revised as part of that, specifically with the PM and the preventative maintenance schedule, so that the company would take a better look at their PMs and make sure that their maintenance was improved. The damage was repaired and the unit was returned to service. Answer your question, Commissioner.
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions from commissioners? Hearing none. Mr. Bickley, you may stand down, or stand aside, I should say.
Thank you, Commissioner.
RS, please call your next witness.
RS calls Anthony Sandinato.
Mr. Sandinato, please take the stand.
I appreciate if you would bear with us just a moment while we switch out witnesses.
Take your time.
Mr. Sandinato, if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandinato, please state your full name and occupation.
My name is Anthony Sandinato, and I'm employed as a Senior Regulatory Manager for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Anthony M. Sandinato who pre-filed 6 pages of direct testimony and 5 exhibits labeled AMS-1 to AMS-5 in this case on August 20th, 2000?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed testimony or exhibits?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Anthony Sandinato be entered into the record of this case as if given orally from the stand, and that Mr. Sandinato's exhibits labeled AMS-1 through AMS-6 be marked as a composite hearing exhibit and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Sandinato's pre-filed direct testimony shall be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. And Mr. Sandinato's exhibits AMS-1 through AMS-6 will be entered as a composite exhibit, will be marked as hearing exhibit 10, 11, and entered into the record as the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sandinato, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Would you please present your summary for the Commission?
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, or afternoon, rather. My testimony sets forth the ORS's findings and recommendations resulting from our examination of Energy Carolina's fuel expenses used in the generation of electricity to meet its South Carolina retail customer requirements. ORS examined various fuel-related documents as part of our review. These documents address the company's fuel, environmental, and purchase power expenses for the actual, estimated, and forecast periods. In preparation for this proceeding, ORS analyzed the company's monthly fuel reports, examined the company's contracts for nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, and environmental reagents, and evaluated the company's policies and procedures for fuel procurement. ORS met remotely with company personnel on multiple occasions, representing a variety of areas of expertise to discuss and review the company's fossil and nuclear fuel procurement, fuel transportation, environmental costs and compliance procedures, forecasting, and general company policies and procedures regarding fuel procurement. ORS reviewed the company's projected sales and analyzed them with regards to projections from the last fuel proceeding and the actual sales from the actual period. ORS found the company's sales projections to be reasonable and in line with historical sales data. ORS reviewed the company's forecasted costs for nuclear fuel, coal, natural gas, fuel oil, transportation, and environmental reagents for the estimated and forecast periods. ORS compared the monthly projected costs to historical projections, actual data, and commodity prices from numerous industry publications. ORS found the company's forecasted costs to be reasonable. Subsequent to the filing of my direct testimony, a stipulation was entered into between the company, ORS, and the South Carolina Energy Users Committee in this proceeding. Also, it is my understanding that the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy filed a letter on September 4th indicating they did not object to the stipulation. Should the Commission approve the rates proposed by the company and set forth in the stipulation, the average monthly bill for a residential customer on rate RS using 1,000 kilowatt hours would decrease from $122.14 to approximately $115.37, a net decrease of $6.77, or 5.54%. The stipulation is offered as a fair, reasonable, and full resolution of the signing parties' issues in this proceeding. Further, ORS believes the stipulation is in the public interest and respectfully requests that the Commission approve the stipulation as presented. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Sandinato. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sandinato is available for questions from the Commission.
Commissioner questions for Mr. Sandinato.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Vice Chair Belzer.
Good afternoon, Ms. Sandinato.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Belzer.
You heard that that you were going to be thrown under the bus, right?
I did.
Okay. Can you tell me, with regard to these, the buyout of the coal contract obligations that happened in April of this year, did OR review those amounts?
Yes, Commissioner Belzer, that is a great question, and this is something that we saw as very important as well. We did review this extensively. We had multiple discussions with the company, as well as reviewed many data requests that contained confidential information. Through our analysis, we saw up to April, the company was utilizing other coal purchasing options to delay its purchasing obligations and its right to flex down contractual options. And then leading up through April and through the discussion, as company witness Verderame discussed, we talked through the additional points as well as the company's evaluation process into looking what the additional cost of burning coal versus the lower cost natural gas would be on the system. Based on those inputs, it ultimately was calculated to cost more for the customers if they were to burn that coal and take those deliveries rather than enter into these coal contract buyouts.
So, and you jumped ahead to where I was going to go with that. It wasn't just the amount, but ORS. You're telling me that ORS reviewed the circumstances and reviewed the other options that would have been considered by Duke at that time. Are you telling me that?
Yes, that is correct, ma'am.
Okay. And based on ORS's review, y'all did not find that these coal buyouts were unreasonable or not prudent. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer. Any other commissioner questions for Mr. Sandinato? Hearing none, Mr. Sandinato, please stand aside. Thank you for your testimony. ORS, please call your next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. ORS at this time calls this next witness, who is Robert Lawyer.
Mr. Lawyer, please take the stand.
And again, I appreciate you bearing with us a moment while Mr. Lawyer enters the room and takes the stand.
Take your time.
Thank you. Mr. Lawyer is now present.
Please proceed.
Mr. Lawyer, if you would raise your right hand, please.
Mr. Lawyer, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawyer, would you please state your name and occupation?
My name is Robert Lawyer. I am the Deputy Director of Energy Efficiency and Renewables with the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Robert A. Lawyer who pre-filed 6 pages of direct testimony in this case on August 20th, 2020?
I am.
If I ask you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asked that Mr. Lawyer's direct testimony be entered in records if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lawyer, did you also file one exhibit along with your direct testimony marked as Exhibit RAL-1?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or edits to that exhibit?
I do not.
Mr. Chairman, ORS asked that RAL-1 filed with Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed direct testimony be marked as the next hearing exhibit and entered into the record.
Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed exhibit RAL-1 would be marked as hearing exhibit 12 and entered into the record as the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lawyer, did you prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please share your summary with the Commission?
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to present ORS's review of Duke Energy Carolinas Distributed Energy Resource Program, also known as DERP, expenses during the review period of June 2019 through September 2021. ORS reviewed the proposed annual DERP charges of $7.62 for residential customers, $34.81 for commercial, and $1,200 for industrial customers. ORS finds that the company's DERP expenses were reasonably incurred, and their calculations are in compliance with Act 236 and Commission orders. The company also updated the value of distributed energy resources in accordance with Commission Order number 2015-194. That concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lawyer is available for questions from the Commission.
Commission questions for Mr. Lawyer. Mr. Lawyer, I have a question for you. Mr. Lawyer?
Okay.
On page 5 of your pre-filed direct testimony, you discussed the value of distributed energy resources, correct?
That is correct.
Is ORS concerned with the significant decrease in NEM resource values and their effect on rooftop solar demand?
No, sir. As Mr. Martin testified to earlier, these values are based and derived from the results of the avoided costs last fall in docket 2019-185E. I'm not really concerned with, I'd say, further participation in rooftop solar directly. I think there's still enough incentives out there, although some are gone, such as solar rebate. I still think there's enough out there to draw attention to it and still maintain participation. Maybe not to previous levels we've seen from Act 236, but going forward, I think there still will be significant participation.
Understood. Does ORS agree with Mr. Martin's response to year-over-year changes in values for marginal capacity costs and ancillary costs?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for answering my questions, Mr. Lawyer. Any other commissioner questions?
You're welcome.
All right, hearing no further questions from Mr. Lawyer. Mr. Lawyer, you may stand aside.
Thank you, Commissioner.
ORS?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation.
Is there anything else from any other parties?
Not from the company, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Nothing from anyone else?
Nothing from the Coastal Conservation League and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, it looks like we're at the end of our hearing. Attorney Stark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have just a very short amount of housekeeping issues. Predominantly among them, we have a proposed order date to discuss. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that September the 21st is probably the latest we could make effective use of a proposed order.
Any discussion on September 21st by the commissioners?
Is this not going to be on next week's agenda?
Madam Vice Chair, I believe that it will be on, my understanding is that it would be on next week's agenda for commission decision.
We sort of need the proposed order before the decision.
I think it was anticipated, Madam Vice Chair, that the written order would follow the decision, but if, as you say, we do need the proposed order before that date, then...
Mr. Chairman, is that something the hearing officer can work out with the parties after the close of the hearing?
That's fine with me. Are you good with that, Attorney Stark?
Yes, sir.
All right. Next matter.
If it suits you, Mr. Chairman, I can go through the list of exhibits.
Please.
All right, thank you, sir. The first hearing exhibit is the stipulation. The second hearing exhibit is Mr. Verderrame's direct testimony exhibits 1 and 2. The third hearing exhibit is Mr. Capps' direct exhibits 1 and 2. The fourth exhibit, the fourth hearing exhibit, would be Mr. Capps' both confidential and public version of his exhibit 3. That is to be held under seal. The fifth hearing exhibit is reserved for a late filed exhibit to be received from the company concerning the quantification of considered alternatives to the coal ash contract obligations buyout, the concerns raised by the Vice Chairman. The sixth hearing exhibit is the direct exhibit 1 and 2, Mr. Church. The seventh hearing exhibit is the direct exhibit number 1 of Jason Martin. The eighth hearing exhibit are the exhibits 1 through 13 to the amended direct testimony of Ms. Kimberly McGee. The ninth hearing exhibit are the pre-filed direct audit exhibits ABD 1 through ABD 10. The 10th hearing exhibit are the pre-filed direct exhibits BSB 1, BSB 6. The 11th hearing exhibit are the pre-filed direct exhibits AMS 1 through 5. And the 12th hearing exhibit is the pre-filed direct exhibit RAL 1. That is the complete list, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anything else? If there's nothing, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. Great weekend.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.